Welcome to the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Hello, and you're very welcome to another episode of the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Joining me from a lockdown Salzburg, Joe. How are you doing, buddy?
Very good, thanks, JP. Great to be here.
Lockdown, Kev.
Loving the lockdown, JP. Loving it.
And a very free and happy Finno in Scotland, where lockdown seems to have finished and fans are returning. How are you doing, Finno?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Good, guys. Good to have you back. We've got an action-packed show this week. We're going to have a chat about the Premier League games coming up this weekend. And, of course, a glance back at what happened last weekend. There's a majestic FA Cup story. Kev's going to tell us all about that. We actually have Sean Dyche on the show this week. He met up with Joe earlier on. Arsenal's worst start since 1981 has forced Manfred back onto the show. But we're just going to start with the breaking news that the Newcastle game, which was the opening game of the weekend, has now been postponed. It's been cancelled due to the COVID risk. Now, the Premier League protocol said that if a team had fewer than 15 players available, the match will be postponed. An hour ago, it was still on. Newcastle had up to 5 players with COVID. It didn't say who it was, but obviously it's worsened since then. So that game's called off. Right decision, though, lads, huh?
Yeah, I think it's just a reminder, isn't it, that this is like the weirdest season and that nothing is normal about the season. And I think sometimes, it's almost possible to forget sometimes, isn't it? That the football's all going on, but then this is real world stuff. And I guess there was no other option than to call it off.
I'm amazed that it's taken this long, actually, for one of the Premier League games to be called off. It's a bit of a shame for Newcastle in a sense, isn't it? Because obviously they got the win this weekend, and they'd have been really looking forward to going on a bit of a run.
I mean, look, the game against Palace could have went either way. I'm delighted with the result. But Newcastle were down to bare bones. There were so many players missing. Colin Wilson was back and he was the difference. And Joe Linton did everything right. But he's like Humpty Dumpty. When he gets to the box, he just falls apart. You know what I mean? He doesn't know what he's doing there. But somehow, he set up the goal for Colin Wilson, who took it brilliantly, ice cold, in the very end. And then Joe Linton, to reward all his hard work and all his donkey work, he got a jammy deflection and got a goal. And I think his confidence would have been flying. But going into the Villa game, and Villa have lost the last 2, I think, those Newcastle are missing more players. And I don't know. I think Villa are better than Palace on their day. So, yeah, I'm not that disappointed this game is postponed. I would have rather us going in with a full squad, even though we're going in with confidence and the win. But it's definitely the right decision, and I'm glad the Premier League are doing it. You know what I mean? Because we did think they were getting. Some of us thought that we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves by bringing fans back in. Obviously, Newcastle is not one of those stadiums where they are coming back in. So that game is called off. First game on Saturday at 1:30 Central European time is Burnley against Everton. Everton. This is a tough game, and Burnley, of course, coming off an absolute hammering by Manchester City. And earlier on this week, Joe caught up with their manager, Sean Dyche.
Sean Dyche, thank you very much for joining us. Difficult result on Saturday against Manchester City. How do you rate the performance of your team?
Injuries. Playing against a team that had Sterling, Bernardo, Fernandinho and Foden on the bench. What chance did we have? Like millions of people around the world, we need hope at this time of year. Hopefully he'll be back between the sticks next week. They might have got us at the Etihad, but we'll smash them at Turf Moor.
Before that rematch, though, we have the January transfer window. Would you be looking to invest?
I think Haaland, Lewandowski and De Bruyne could do a job for us. We'll need the chairman McGarlick to find more than the 1 million I was allowed to spend on Dale Stevens in the summer, though. Knowing us, we'll end up with Phil Jones and Danny Drinkwater.
One last one. I wanted to ask you about your trip to the Grand Canyon. What did you make of that experience?
Is that a joke? My assistant took me. What a waste of time. I left after 2 minutes. I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking at. It was just a big hole in the ground. One of the most natural wonders of the world. My ass. Give me Burnley versus Stoke on a cold and wet Tuesday night any day.
Another disappointing day for Sean Dyche, I reckon, lads.
Yeah, I think so. 5-0 against City isn't exactly like an issue or necessarily like a poor performance. The best teams in the world could lose 5-0 against Man City, but it is just a bit demoralising. And yeah, as you say, Everton will want to get back to winning ways. So I think, yeah, Everton to win by maybe a couple of goals.
Yeah, I think the commentator said actually at the Man City Burnley game that the last 4 fixtures between City and Burnley at the Etihad have all ended up 5-0. Which is a ridiculous stat if you're Burnley. Moving on, Man City, who got the win obviously against Fulham, and Fulham got a big win that no one expected. We were all talking, especially you, Kev. You were saying that look, Man City were going to, show the guns at some stage, and they did big time. They'll probably beat Fulham here as well, but they could have scored 7 or 8. Is this now the return of City? Has their season just started?
Yeah, you have to think so, don't you? We were all saying they're just waiting to absolutely cane someone. And I think if you look at this run of fixtures now, it looks really quite friendly for Man City now. And I think they'll be the team which are happiest with the way the league has gone bizarrely at the moment, because they started so, everyone's been saying how mediocre they've been, including me, to be fair, and how they haven't been able to polish teams off. But you look at the league table, and then with the game in hand, they're right up there. They'll be absolutely delighted with this. And I think, honestly, from everything I've seen, given the quality of their squad and the quality of their players, there's no reason at all why they shouldn't go on now. They might be top of the league in 5 or 6 weeks' time.
And I think we'll see history repeating ourselves here a little bit. Burnley a couple of weeks ago got a bit of a morale boost, shall we say. And I said last week that I think that they were going to come crashing down to earth. I think the same thing's going to happen with Fulham. They got the win last weekend, and I think they're going to kind of see a similar fate that Burnley did this weekend.
I agree with Kev. I predicted City to win the league before a ball had been kicked. And I haven't changed my mind yet. I still think at some point City are going to go on a run where they win, 8 to 10 games in a row. And what a fixture for this one. They could be getting another 5 goals, I reckon.
Yeah, the next fixture should also be a cracker. You've got to be delighted, Finno, with the turnaround at West Ham. The start of the season, we were nailed them on for relegation. They've really turned it around. West Ham win again, beat Villa, controversial game. I'm sure you'll go into it in a second, but you're up to 5th now at home to Man United, who also very controversial, and Cavani get the win as well. This should be a cracker. You got to fancy it though,
Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here in that West Ham get results, they don't play well. Last night we did get the result against a Villa team that were quite clearly better than West Ham going forward. I only got to see the second half, but we had one chance after 30 seconds and we scored it, and then we defended for the rest of the half. West Ham's place in the table probably flatters them a little bit, but fair play to David Moyes. He's got them in the European places somewhat on merit. As you've kind of alluded to there, Man United will be probably quite boosted by the fact that they managed to come back, I think, from 2-0 down against Southampton. They'll be on form. It'll be interesting to see what happens when, I think this is the first game with fans in the stands, how that impacts things, if it impacts things at all, with that small number of fans. But again, going into this game, the pressure's off West Ham. We're doing significantly better than we were doing last season. If we manage to avoid relegation, I think it's a good season. So, yeah, a bit of a free hit, this one.
And you haven't mentioned Antonio yet. Is he back?
Yeah, so he was back. I think he played the first half last night and then came off at halftime for Haller. Again, I think probably just trying to ease him in a little bit, making sure that he doesn't, re-injure himself, because the next kind of 6-8 weeks will be really important for all Premier League teams, West Ham especially, I think.
Joe, did you see anything in that Manchester United performance against Southampton to suggest that they could go on a run? Or was it a bit of a lucky smash and grab?
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks for that reminder, Finno. I was really trying hard to forget that. No, to be fair to Man United, they were the best team on the day. Southampton didn't deserve to be 2-0 up. Man U played pretty well, actually. And I think I'm right in saying they've now won 8 league games in a row away from home. Mm-hmm. So they're obviously much better away from home than they are at Old Trafford. Obviously, Cavani brings a completely different kind of game to the table for them. He's such a good finisher. He's such a good focal point in their attack. I can see him going on a bit of a run. I don't see Man U going on enough of a run to finish in the top 4. But they are improving, they are getting better. But like we've said before, there's just no consistency. You never know which Man U's going to turn up. So I can't really call it at the weekend against West Ham. I'll probably go for another draw.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That they're impossible to predict. But having said that, we have a tendency then to criticise the team for being that. For not necessarily having a predictable character. But what they do have is, I don't know if it's resilience or it's tenacity or it's just the wealth of options that they have in the squad. They just have that ability to drag something from nowhere when you think they're down and you think they're gonna get beaten. We've seen it away from home, especially, as everyone knows, but so many times this season. And looking at that game, Bruno Fernandes, doing nothing basically in the first half, but then the change comes, Cavani comes on or whatever, and suddenly everything livens up, and what a luxury it is to be able to bring on a player like that at halftime. But they have all that, and I don't want to say it's just about the squad. I want to say something nice about Man United. They obviously have character, bags of character, huge amounts of resilience. They can dig stuff up from nowhere. All credit to them. I'm pretty sure they will win this one. And I wouldn't be all that surprised if again in a few weeks' time we are talking about them being top 4 contenders. We'll see.
Something that I do want to mention that you've just reminded me of is the VAR scandal that we had at the very end of the game, both with the penalty and with the offside goal from Ollie Watkins. But similarly, one of the single most ridiculous dives I've ever seen from Jack Grealish, where the lightest feather touched one knee and he went down 2 seconds later clutching his other knee. It was laughably bad. And that's something I think, if we're going to punish players in game for fouls, why are we not punishing players for diving when that's quite clearly a dive? He's quite clearly trying to con a player and quite clearly trying to con the referee.
Yeah, and Finno, obviously I'll let you get back to the other stuff about VAR in a minute. But again, sorry to say this again, but it sometimes seems to me, and I've said this once before on the podcast before, that it's a slightly different rule for English players and non-English players. And I think if he'd have been a non-English player, I think he would have been punished. But I think it's something about English players and English internationals especially, they're beyond reproach somehow. And I don't know whether it's the referees, whether it's VAR, whether it's just a general approach or whatever. But I mean, honestly, you're absolutely right. Laughable's the word.
Yeah, I think it's something that definitely needs to be looked at. Declan Rice, a very, very soft penalty in my opinion, that was given after much looking over from VAR. And then the offside goal, yes, technically was offside, but again, much like the Bamford goal a couple of weeks ago, was inches and was definitely looking at like the bottom of the arm versus the top of an arm. We're talking millimeters, and if we're talking millimeters for goals or no goals, we should be looking at it for other fouls. Like, let's use VAR. If we're going to use it, let's use it properly and fully rather than just for every so often.
Very good point, Kev, there about the English players. I think it might actually, some of it might go back to 25, 30 years ago, before the Klinsmans and Co arrived in the Premier League and they were accused of diving. But the home-based British or Irish players would never dive. Of course, now it's
exactly when it's an English player. I mean, and listen, I'm a Liverpool fan. This goes all the way back to Michael Owen. Don't get me wrong. Michael Owen, dives in a World Cup, and everyone says, oh, that's amazing. But a foreigner does it, and it's absolutely scandalous. And you're right. I think it does go back that far, even further. And somehow the class of punditry that we have in this country. Doesn't get over it, hasn't moved on, and it's not just that. I think it's somehow woven in to the foundations of the or the structures of the refereeing and the structures of the league somehow. And it's just not called out. And again, the other side of it is, foreign players, don't get that benefit. When it comes at the other end as well, and with penalties and so on, and again, all right, I'm a Liverpool fan, so I'm gonna bring this out. I did think that was the case for Luis Suarez for a long time, and I do think it's the case for Mo Salah, who takes incredible amounts of punishment. And I know everyone takes the piss, and probably quite rightly, because it's just a bit of fun, and you're within your rights to do it. But I genuinely think Mo Salah doesn't get half the penalties that he should get.
I'm just going to run off course here briefly, but one of the strangest Christmas presents I ever got years ago was Jaap Stam's book. I don't know why somebody bought me Jaap Stam's book, because I'm not a Man United fan and not particularly like Jaap Stam, but I read it anyway. And was when he'd signed for Lazio, and basically in the book, the one thing that got him sacked from Man United, got him sold by Ferguson, was he said Ferguson encouraged us to go down a little bit easier in the box when we play in the Champions League, and because of that he was sold. So that kind of, back then this stuff wasn't really tolerated. Now everyone's diving and falling over the place. But you're right, I think the English players do get an easier ride than the foreigners. You're right there, Kev. Moving on to the last game on Saturday night, this could be the game of the weekend, really, because Chelsea couldn't break Tottenham down. But Mourinho set up brilliantly and hit them on the break, and Spurs went back to the top of the league. Chelsea didn't play that badly. They couldn't find a way. But the players they have, they're going to go out. Leeds will not sit back. Bielsa ball, against Everton, there was no respect at all. But it was just, we're going at you every chance. It was hammer and tongs the whole way. And the players they have on the break, I think the guy who got the goal might have been called Rodrigo. They brought him in from Spain, from Valencia. He scored a cracker, but he's a live wire. And I think Leeds will give Chelsea a real go here. So this hopefully will be an open, free scoring game. I'm sure you're going to pick Chelsea to win, Finno.
I think so. I'm not entirely sure. I kind of get the feeling that teams are starting to revert to type a little bit in the Premier League. I don't think there's quite the same shock value that we had, say, in the first 4 or 5 games of the season. Leeds with a bit of a late smash and grab, probably, in some ways riding their luck a little bit. And Chelsea looked like a decent team. They didn't look like quite the calamitous defence that they did early on in the season. It's going to be an interesting one. I'm wary of setting it up to be a great game when we tried to do that last weekend with the Spurs game, and it ended up being a bit of a flop.
Well, in fairness to Joe, he did call it. Joe did say, that it could be lined up for an absolute disaster and a goalless draw. And unfortunately for us, he was right. What's your verdict on this one, Joe?
I think there'll definitely be goals in this one. I can't see another 0-0. Yeah, I just thought with Chelsea and Tottenham, I don't think the relationship between the two managers is quite as rosy as what some people tried to make out. I think they desperately didn't want to lose to each other, Lampard and Mourinho. So I could just see that one coming. But for this weekend, obviously Leeds, fantastic win against Everton. Bamford going back to Chelsea, where I think he started his career, so he's bound to score. But I'm gonna go for a Chelsea victory. I think Chelsea will win a narrow game, 3-2.
I'm going to go for loads of goals and a draw. Apparently, Leeds have been involved in over half of the top 5 games that has the most shots this season. They just attack. So they're going to score goals. Chelsea score goals as well, I think. Going for a brilliant 2-2 draw.
Well, I hope you're right, actually, JP, because that'd be good. I reckon Chelsea have got enough for them. I think if they've got one failing going forward, they've got obviously lots of options, but I'm not sure if they've really got just fair. Do they lack imagination sometimes, or something? I'm not sure what the word is. Sometimes, you're looking for something a little bit special. The only thing I'd say about Leeds is every time they've played a good team, they've found a way to make life difficult for them, haven't they? And it's been different the way they've approached it. Sometimes it's hell for leather. And sometimes they've set themselves up in that really, smart, difficult to play against way. I'm sure they'll set themselves up to be difficult to play against. I wouldn't be all that surprised if it's slightly lower scoring than some of the suggestions, but yeah, I reckon Chelsea will have enough.
Right, moving on to Sunday, early kickoff, 1 o'clock at the Hawthorns. West Brom against Palace. West Brom got their first win out of the bottom 3 for a while. Palace beaten by Newcastle. There's some really good players in the Palace squad. I didn't realise till I looked at the bench, and there's Sakho from Liverpool, there's Batshuayi, Benteke, Eze, obviously Will Saha could be back. But just, I don't know. Newcastle seemed to pass the ball better, but deserved the win probably in the end, just about. But West Brom could do this one. A bit of confidence from the win against Sheffield United. Palace coming off a defeat. Again, who knows what's going to happen with COVID till now and then. If Saha will be back or not, if he'll recatch it or... But it's a bigger game for West Brom than it is for Palace, Joe.
I'm not so sure about that. I think Palace are in danger of getting dragged into this scrap. It's a great reminder, isn't it? It was only a few weeks ago where most people, myself included, were saying West Brom, Fulham, gone, no chance, going to get relegated. But they both won at the weekend. And there's not much of a gap now between the likes of, Brighton, Palace, and it won't take much for West Brom, Fulham. If they win a couple more games, then more and more teams are going to get dragged into it. So, if I was a Palace fan, I'd start to be nervously looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, well, I know. I think there's too much quality for them to fall down. And with Will Zaha, they probably could have beaten Newcastle. Saying that, it was a late smash and grab, and the game could have went either way. They had chances, but Callum Wilson, I think, had won the whole game, and he's just ice cold. He's just ice cold. Put it through the keeper's legs. I'll go for West Brom win. I think that they'll do it at home.
I agree with JP that it's a must-win game for West Brom because, as you say, Joe, they are starting to kind of close the gap between, that I think it's 16th or 15th are on 10 points, and then there's Palace on 13. That's only a 7-point gap, but it is quite a considerable gap when you think of the run of games that both West Brom and the relegation teams have. I think West Brom play some much better teams coming forward in the next few weeks. So I think they'll really be looking to get some points. I also think West Brom have a decent team. I know, JP, you were saying about the firepower of Palace, but West Brom has a quality team there of individuals. They've got Diangana, they've got people like Kyle Bartley, who was ex-Arsenal youth. It's a strong team of individuals. It's just whether or not Bilic can get them playing in a way that's together.
Once Zaha comes back, we spoke about it before, the Man United game earlier on in the season when they won at Old Trafford. He's a big fish in a small pond, but he's bloody hard to stop when he's on form for anybody or any defence. So if he's back, I'll give Palace a chance. I don't know yet what his situation is. 3:15 on Sunday, Sheffield United. This is a disaster. 1 point now, and then they, by Christmas, if they don't get a couple of wins, they could be in serious trouble against Leicester. Leicester, shocked against Liverpool. Kevin brought up last week that Liverpool were the deserved winners and Leicester didn't offer a whole lot. We all expected them to beat Fulham. They didn't. They were overturned and they've fallen away a little bit, but surely they'll go to Sheffield United, who have no confidence. Lost the last 5, I think, in a row, maybe more. 1 point from the start of the season. There was no big overhaul changes to suggest, look, it's going to be a disaster of a season. It's hard to know what's really happened. Maybe it's the fans. Bramall Lane, the fans get behind the team. That could be an aspect here, but it's not looking good for Sheffield United, lads.
I thought the Foxes would bounce back, to be honest, after, as you said, a dismal performance against Liverpool, but it was almost even more of a dismal performance against Fulham. And it will be interesting to see how Brendan Rodgers kind of stops that rot. You would like to think that against the bottom team of the league that they would be able to get a decent win, but having watched Sheffield United a few times in the last few weeks, they actually play decent football. They're stuffy, they're in your face, and they do get forward with chances, but it's, for whatever reason, things just haven't gone their way. And I do wonder whether or not, and this is a bit of a hot take, I think, but could Sheffield United be last season's Southampton? Where we consigned Southampton to relegation this time last season, and yet now here we are talking about them being potential top 4. Sheffield United, I think, just need a bit of a spark, whether that comes before Christmas or after January. And then I think, actually, given the strength of the relegation teams around them, I think they could find it relatively easy to get through and get above that 17th place.
I just got one more sort of slightly odd thought about... do you think there's an outside chance that someone could be thinking about Brendan for the Arsenal job?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's a good match for Arsenal. In terms of what we think of traditionally Arsenal playing, free-flowing, expansive football as of the late 1990s, and he definitely fits that mold. Will he deal with the pressure? At Celtic, he didn't really have any pressure. When he went to Liverpool, did he deal with it that well? You'll be a better placed judge than me to say. I just don't know whether or not his personality would rub the Arsenal faithful up the wrong way.
His teams have always played great football. I was a huge fan of the Swansea team.
Yeah.
When he brought them up, and they were really good to watch. Great football. I wasn't surprised when he went to Liverpool, and I didn't see much of him at Celtic. I know he won the trophy every year, but I'm sure they play good football. They have some big results in Europe, and he's got Leicester playing some good football as well. So Arsenal like nice football, so it would be a half decent fit, I think.
Kev, to come back to you on the flip side, if you're Brendan Rodgers and you're offered the Arsenal job in the state that Arsenal are in now, would you take it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, you can say that, but if someone jangles enough money in front of you, you know, if there's like an extra 10 million quid a year, or probably not that much, but some signing off, I guess it would be pretty hard to turn down, wouldn't it? No, I agree with JP. His teams always do play football, and it really didn't take him very long to bring really good football. Now, I almost said back to Leicester, but in all honesty, you know, the standard that they were playing almost immediately actually was arguably even better in a way than what we saw in the title-winning team. I think he'd be a brilliant fit for Arsenal, absolutely brilliant. I'm not really suggesting it's going to happen, but just somehow seems to me that you wouldn't be all that surprised, at least, right?
No, I really read him as a manager, and I think Arsenal, you know, do like that kind of one-touch football and pass and move, and you know, he does that little triangles in and around the box. Rodgers' teams always play nice football. Moving on to the big game of the weekend, 5:30 Central European time, the North London derby, top of the table Tottenham against Arsenal, who are in absolute crisis. This is the worst start for Arsenal since 1981. And now there's a lot of questions about Mikel Arteta. Would he stay, or what's going to happen to him? We spoke to our Arsenal specialist, Manfred, earlier on to see what he had to say.
Thanks for having me on. Well, last time I was with you, I said that the honeymoon for Arteta might be over. I'm pretty sure it's completely over now. It's been 3 games without a win in the Premier League, and even though we're miraculously only 4 points, I think, off 5th place, people are starting to question what Arteta is actually trying to do. And especially seeing that he's kind of learning on the job. I mean, this is his first position as a professional manager, not as an assistant. Whether he's equipped and capable of actually dealing with the issues that we have. Because, we've got a very slow midfield. I think everyone can see that Xhaka and Ceballos don't move the ball quickly enough, at least not to beat Wolves. And then you've got the likes of Willian in there, who was apparently one of Arteta's own choices, and he, at least in the fans' eyes, is not doing particularly well. I think a lot of people understand that he's probably struggling with the fact that Partey is missing. He had an instant impact when he came on, and his injury means that we've lost a fairly productive midfield outlet. Hard to say otherwise. We had a few chances. It doesn't help that Aubameyang seems to be bereft of chances at the front, and when he does get them, he used to stick them away. He doesn't seem to be doing it now. So, especially with the North London derby looming, it's probably, again, one of those that Arteta probably needs at least a point from to silence a few of the critics that are there. I mean, as always with Arsenal, you've got knee-jerk reactions of fans saying, "Ooh, why don't we just sack him, and get someone in to start with the youngsters?" I think that's not going to happen. The Arsenal board have, for better or for worse, invested in Arteta, and I don't think they will ever consider sacking him. At least not before the end of the season, depending on how the rest of the season goes. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what we do against Tottenham. If we lose that one, I think we might see some serious questioning and some serious trouble coming Mikel's way.
Good stuff, Manfred. Interesting. Manfred spoke about Partey there. Paul Merson just came out and said that if Partey plays, so much Ozil, Mesut Ozil should be in the squad for the creativity. Arsenal, when you look at it now, I was picking them up at the start of the season because they'd won the FA Cup and they went on a little run. They're in 14th place on 13 points. They've won 1 of the last 5. They're below Newcastle. If Arsenal are in and around where they are come January, will somebody else come in, Kev?
I think Manfred made the point really well there. He's in his first job as a manager. He's in his first job as a manager at Arsenal, and at an Arsenal team which is, needs a lot of work. And he did amazingly well, at the end of last season to pick up that trophy. They had a nice start to the season, obviously, where they nicked the Charity Shield, whatever it's called now, Community Shield. at the start of the season. And even when, in the first sort of league games, you could sort of say, all right, I sort of see what he's trying to do because they can build so nicely from the back. But now, oh my God, they're just tedious. They're not even interesting in how bad they are. This is really, really boring. And so I don't know whether they'll make a change or not, but I'm not sure he will make it to the end of the season. I'm really not.
I think it's interesting the parallels that we can draw between Arteta and somebody like Steven Gerrard, who came into a Rangers team that was a bit of a basket case, and he was allowed the time to be able to shape the team and mold the team in his image. And now we're starting to see the fruits of his labour at Rangers and seeing such a strong Rangers team. My concern with Arsenal is that they're relying, and Manfred said it there, they're putting all their eggs in one basket with Thomas Partey. If you're a strong top 4 team, you need to have 25 players that are willing to go out there, win games on a Wednesday, win games on a Saturday, or in Arsenal's case on a Thursday and a Sunday, and do it consistently. And at the moment, they just don't have that, and it just seems like they're in a bit of a funk. I don't know whether or not they can afford to rip up the rule book or rip up the playbook once again and bring in a new manager. We discussed Brendan Rodgers, but really, is it more of an institutional thing with Arsenal rather than just the staff there? How much of the backroom staff are making a difference here? And I think the team, I think Merson makes a good point. Mesut Ozil should be in the squad. Unfortunately, he's not, so they're going to have to reap the lack of rewards there. But definitely an interesting time for Arsenal.
I just have to disagree with you there, Finno, about the first job as a manager about Rangers. I mean, if Mikel Arteta went to Scotland, if you're either at Celtic or Rangers, you're in either the richest or the second richest team in the league. And if you're not going to come first, you're going to come second. And if not, you've got a great chance of winning something. At Arsenal, they're nowhere near the top 4. With money, I think, with how the other teams are set up at the minute, I think a better comparison will be Frank Lampard, maybe at Derby. You've got a point about the backroom staff for sure at Arsenal. But, Arsenal have got the players. Lacazette, Aubameyang, they're class, right? They spent big money on Pepe. Okay, you can say give him time, but what a start. Won the FA Cup, and they look good at the start of the season, but the wheels have come off the wagon.
But what does the FA Cup mean when you're nearly at the bottom of the league? I take your point when you're talking about Gerrard in terms of you're either first or second. But in theory, it's the same thing with Arsenal. Arsenal are one of the richest teams in the world. They should be challenging for the title year in, year out, but they're not. They're not even looking at top 4 right now. Right now, they'll be happy to take, top half, which is just an absolutely insane point of view or position for a team or a club like Arsenal to be in.
They have a fantastic record in the last 15, 20 years of winning the FA Cup. They seem to win it every other season, under Wenger and under whoever, but that's it. That's the limit, I think. I don't think they're a top 4 team at the minute, and they haven't really been for a while. And I think that if they can finish in the European places, win the FA Cup, until there's an overhaul or something happens, I don't see it changing, Right, Tottenham, of course, having gained the point they needed to against Chelsea to go back to the top of the league. Look dangerous on the break, but they're really solid at the back, and they're still my prediction for, I think they're really going to do something this season. Finno?
I'm kind of interested to see what happens in this game because, as we've discussed, Arsenal desperately need the points. And for the first time in a while in these kind of big games, Tottenham are the favourites. If you think of the Man City game and even the Chelsea game to a certain degree, they were the underdogs. And so they were able to sit back and hit people on the counter and, frustrate teams. But here, I think, thanks to Arsenal's poor start to the season, the onus is definitely on Tottenham to come out and win this game, and it would be such a psychological boost for that team to go out and win well. But I just don't know whether or not Mourinho will set them up to do so. And so that, if I was an Arsenal player or an Arsenal fan, I'd be quite interested in seeing how much ball they get, during this game and whether or not they can make their chances count. Because as we've seen, Tottenham are lethal going forward on the counter, but how do they deal with being, potentially the favourites for the game?
Yeah, Mourinho might actually sit back for a while, invite Arsenal on and try and just do that, hit them on the break. Arsenal are very low in confidence. He might go the other way, might go out and say, let's go and crush them, bring on Bale. They've got the players to do it. I can only see this game going one way, and I'm sorry, Manfred, it's a Tottenham win.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. JP. There's no reason why it won't be. It's just, if there is anything, it's kind of like you said. Mourinho can sometimes show a bit too much respect. Sometimes, I think, for the big teams, or like you say, always prefers to be the underdog. So let's see how they approach this. But it'd be a big surprise, wouldn't it, if they don't?
I don't know. I mean, what a run of fixtures for Spurs to have had to play City, Chelsea, and then Arsenal in the space of 10 days or so. I wonder if they will be a little bit mentally and physically tired. Although, having said that, for a North London derby, I'm sure they'll be fine. I think, Finno made a really good point. Tottenham should win this game. They have all the form, all the momentum, the players. It's just, will Mourinho be defensive, or will he put all his cards on the table, and will they attack Arsenal and kind of go for the kill? I'm really intrigued to see how it's going to play out. But if I had to pick, I would pick Spurs, yeah. I just think Arsenal are just such a mess at the moment.
You just mentioned the fixtures there. I think it was Kevin that brought up about a month ago when I was bigging up Tottenham that, Spurs have this nightmare run of fixtures, and let's see how they're doing at the end. If they're still top, they've got a good chance. I mean, so far so good for Mourinho. And he picks his battles. He knows when to defend and when to attack, I think. And, I really fancy him this season. Finno?
I'd go as far as to say is if they're top by Christmas, they will win the league.
That's a big shout.
Oh,
he's gone early.
And this comes from a West Ham fan.
Get down to the bookies now. Get down to the bookies now. Right, the Saturday night live game at 8:15 is at Anfield. Liverpool against Wolves. Diego Jota gets a chance to play against his former team, Kev. I actually watched a fair bit of the game against Brighton. Aaron Connolly had a great chance and knocked it wide one-on-one. Alisson, the penalty was brutal. I seen the highlights, and they showed the decision of the penalty at the end again. I think it was Andy Robertson on Danny Welbeck.
Mm-hmm.
A little clip. I think Liverpool had an identical penalty with Mo Salah a couple of weeks ago as well. Brighton, of course, Liverpool had disallowed goals. One of them was obviously offside. The other one was very close. I think a draw was a fair result. Before we go into the game, I just want to speak about Jurgen Klopp, because I watched the game on BT Sport, and at the end of the game, he criticised BT Sport for James Milner's injury and for the early kickoff. Right, so he's complaining about the early kickoff. But BT Sport actually put up this graph, and they showed all the games in the last year when Liverpool have come off a midweek fixture and then played early on Saturday, and they've actually won about 90% of them. Liverpool have, Then he's blaming Sheffield United for the fact that there's no 5 subs in the Premier League, because Chris Wilder and co went against that. Obviously they're a small club. Wilder responded and said, look, we have the right to defend ourselves, and it's our right. Right, Kev, let's have it.
No, I'll tell you what, I'll save it for the poetry at the end, JP. Looking ahead rather than looking back, I think what Klopp has to do now is he's going to have to stop trying to marshal his resources and and being so careful of the energy levels of his players. And I think if he doesn't have senior players who are fit enough to play in the way he wants to, I think he's going to have to turn to the youngsters. Because what's happened is, we talked about this right at the start of when we started doing this podcast, right? We talked about the remarkable thing about Liverpool last year was their ability to win games by 1 goal. And it was Klopp, had turned this team into the masters of just getting their noses ahead in the second half and then being able to hold on. And I think partly to do with energy levels, partly to do with injuries, partly to do with VAR a little bit, I really do. I think you can now see clearly 1 goal is not enough. Liverpool go out and they say, we'll just do enough because we'll just get a goal and we'll just do it, and that's not going to cut it this season. And I think what Klopp's going to have to do is go out there and tell his team to be 100% for every one of these games. And just one final thing, it terrifies me, this game against Wolves, partly because I've just seen the time that we're recording this is just as the first Champions League games are about to kick off. And the worst fears have been realised of Liverpool fans that Alisson is injured now as well. He's not playing tonight. We've got the young Irish kid in goal, who, in his cup performances does not bode well. Kelleher, yeah.
Only a kid.
And Liverpool, I think the only way now they're going to win games is they're going to have to go out hell for leather and try to outscore the opposition. And in a sense, maybe that's for the best. But just all those things that worked last year are not working for the variety of reasons that I mentioned just now. And I think they need a change of approach.
To be honest, I think Klopp has a fair reason to go after the TV companies. We should be trying to make sure that our teams are in the best places possible, both domestically and also in the European games. The situation is that we've got a team there that have played hell for leather for 90 games, probably maybe 120 games over 2 seasons, and they're just knackered. The other thing I think is Klopp's fault is he using his resources correctly? Like, is he using all 3 subs? How often has he used his full available allowance of substitutes? That's not fair to then put it on other teams if you're not using the subs allowed to you. What would 5 subs do if you're only using 2, for example?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Kev, but you brought it up anyway about that Liverpool, that winning ugly, just getting over the line, getting the win. Have they lost that? But they brought Mane and Henderson off the bench.
Yeah, I don't think they've lost it necessarily. Honestly, I do think the VAR decisions in the second half of that game were really bad. I really do. I think my opinion on the offsides, where it's down to millimetres. I just think it's ridiculous. And we're running short of time, and we're not going onto this now. But football is about joy, right? And it's about other emotions as well. It's about being terrified that you're going to lose, and about that sinking feeling when your team goes behind and all the rest of it. But it's about joy. And when you have to look up at every single goal now, you realise there's a 50-50 chance that it's going to get wiped out. You're just sucking the joy out of things, So, what are you going to do?
I'm actually going to pick Wolves in this game, I think. I just feel that Liverpool aren't quite firing on all cylinders. And obviously, just talking about Wolves, we should just mention the sickening clash of heads between Raul Jimenez, the striker, and David Luiz at the weekend. Obviously, Jimenez, it was confirmed that he's fractured his skull. He's had surgery, so we wish him all the best. But you would think that the Wolves players will really kind of rally around him, and they'll be really up for it to try and win the game for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sickening injury. I'm actually going for Liverpool here. Now, there's 2 reasons. He's out, and if it was last season, they would have had Jimenez and Shota, and I think he's a big loss to them. And, I think Liverpool will do enough to beat Wolves, definitely going ahead. Right, the final game of the weekend on Monday night, Joe, last but not least, South Coast, Southeast Derby, is it? Brighton against Southampton.
Yeah, the M27 Derby, El Clasicoast. Obviously this will be a really good test of where Southampton are at. Obviously they were leading Man United 2-0 with 30 minutes to go, somehow managed to lose the game. We've got a pretty good record down at the Amex, but I just think it'll be interesting to see how we bounce back from that. This will tell, are we a really good side who are going to be pushing for top 10, top 8, or are we at a similar kind of level to Brighton where we're going to be down towards 12 and 15th? Brighton, we've said all along, they're better than their points tally. Like, Brighton are playing well, they're playing good football, they're just not scoring a load of goals. So it's going to be an interesting game. Saints are still missing Danny Ings, but I think we should have too much for Brighton and we should get another 3 points.
I agree with you there. Brighton are definitely better than their position. I mean, they could have scored 2 or 3 against Liverpool. I'll go with Southampton to win this one as well. I think they have too much. Right, VAR decisions are tough. They can drive a fan absolutely bonkers. Some of us, they drive us to the pub. Some of us, we go on social media and we post and rant and rave about them. Some of us turn to our missuses and wives and complain about them. Some geniuses turn them into poetry. Kev, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, well, I've got a new thing this week. I've actually given it a title. This one is called Zen and the Art of Trumpist Delusion. So let's see what we got. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a free kick contrived by James Ward-Prowse, as perfect as this sport allows. After Madcap Match Week 10, I'm following the art of Zen, despite the obvious temptation to give vent to my great frustration. I won't be cursing VAR or ranting at the quite bizarre mistakes that drove me off the deep end and cost the Reds a win this weekend. Instead, I pledged to train my focus away from all the hocus pocus and try to put in words the awe of Chelsea-Tottenham's 0-0 draw. Sorry to be quite so glib, but this really was a damp old squib, as Lampard showed too much respect and found Chelsea's momentum checked. Tottenham barely up to snuff, but still, a draw was just enough to keep them top as Liverpool completely failed to keep their cool. With the top three all held to draws, Manchester took up the cause. City rampant, 5-0 Burnley, Mahrez striking for them early. He adds two more to thus complete a hat-trick that was magnifique and stave off any talk of crisis, as meanwhile Manchester United started like a faded wreck and went behind to Bednarek before Ward-Prowse, this sainted player, squeezed his free kick past De Gea. The headline writers licked their lips, prepared to cash in Solskjaer's chips, but no, he'll wear no mourning cloak, thanks to a half-time masterstroke. Genius or desperation, Cavani proved his side's salvation, unstoppable, a mastodon, scoring 2, creating 1. So where's that leave us 10 games in? Don't even know where to begin. In fact, my only real conclusion is that we're in some weird delusion. All those crazy-ass decisions, the fake noise on our televisions, Tottenham atop the league, the faintest hint of Klopp fatigue. So if your team's underperforming, don't sound a relegation warning. Let's take the games we've played so far and send them up to VAR. Liverpool thrashed 7-2 by Villa? Well, that can't be true. How could they win by that amount? Review, revise, replay, recount. And Arsenal's latest home defeat by Wolves? Get all the fans to tweet. Resist, reject, renege, refuse. No one should have to take fake news. Because if this season's taught us out, it's that there's always room for doubt. Before too long they'll change their tune, so never celebrate too soon.
Brilliant stuff there, Kev. Thanks a million. This has been the Irishman, Englishman, Scotsman Football Podcast. Guys, enjoy the games. Joe, thank you very much.
Thanks, JP.
Super stuff, Kev. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Cheers, Finno.
Cheers, good to chat.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the game. See you all next week. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, please click on the red subscribe button on the bottom right-hand side. Thank you.